Good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of the Time First series hosted by Sevilla Las Mercedes. I'm Marcia Anglerell, and I'm the Culture Affairs Officer of the Venezuela Affairs Unit. So I'm happy to be back again as moderator of our third edition of this program, in which we discuss famous female American leaders. And again, as a reminder, we are doing this program in English so that our viewers can practice their English language skills. We have today back with us the host, who is a director of the documentary, Diane Tsai of Time Magazine. We'll be asking her questions again as usual, and we'll select some of the ones that you pose either through our chat or ones that you have been sent in advance. So today we are honored to be able to be featuring a short documentary on Serena Williams, which I'm sure many of you know her, have heard of her before. She is considered to be the best single female tennis player and the best server of all times. And she's been ranked first by the Women's Tennis Association on 8 occasions, the first time of which was in July 2002 when she was only 20 years old. She's a role model for many African-American girls and for many women in general. And let's first welcome back to Diane. Hello, Diane. How are you doing?
Hello, good. How are you?
Great. Well, we're happy to have you here with us again. I just provided a little bit of background about the documentary, so I'm sure you're all eager to watch it. And we'll come back with Diane again and your questions as soon as we see the film. So let's roll the film. It's always amazing to watch Serena Williams in action and in motion, but it's also so important to be able to hear her voice and listen to what she has to say. So thank you, Diane, for this great film. We know that you're not an expert on Serena Williams herself, but you have had the chance, to interview famous female leaders in different fields. So my first question is, what struck you as a woman about the women that you were able to interview, especially someone like Serena Williams?
Yeah. So something we discussed with Nancy Pelosi a few weeks ago was how it was great for me to hear the stories of women who kind of discovered their career paths later in life, and that they didn't always have a plan. And so it was really interesting to see this full range. On the other hand, there are people like Serena Williams who started tennis when she was 3, and it has been a lifelong passion. And to see her consistently work towards that and become the best was also really inspiring. So that was kind of the first thing that struck me. And I think you're like, and I totally agree with what you were saying about, we see her on the court and there are all these really iconic moments of her winning, of her being frustrated, just like seeing her as an athlete, and then meeting her and getting to talk with her in person, and to have a conversation with her. It was really, really nice to see a different side of her and to get a sense of kind of the full range of her personality. I did think with Serena in particular, it was tricky for us, I think, to, anytime people talk about her or interview her, I think to talk about the sexism that she's faced and the racism, and trying to balance like how much of that you want to focus on when you're talking to her, and imagining what it's like for her to constantly answer those questions about like, what is it like to be a female tennis player? What is it like to be a woman? So I think that was some things that we grappled with when we were making this. But of course, like, our goal with the first series is to talk about the experience of women as they're achieving these firsts. So it was important for us to address that and have her talk about it, and to help people understand what she's been through and what her experience was like. Yeah.
That's some great insight. I think you've already given us a lot to think about. it's been so great working, presenting this project to our viewers. But I'm curious, what other video projects have you been involved in besides the Time First at Time Magazine?
Yeah, so a project that I did pretty soon after First was called The Silence Breakers. And this was for, every year Time chooses a person of the year. And this was the year that the Me Too movement really, really came out. And I had just come out of this project celebrating all these really incredible, diverse women and highlighting each of their individual, unique stories. Um, and then as the Me Too movement started kind of gaining ground, um, it was so interesting to be faced with a very different story where we also wanted to uh, amplify the voices of these women. But instead of creating all these very little short, 2 to 3 minute pieces, we actually did the opposite, where we made a compilation of their stories and interviews, and we put them together because we wanted them to amplify each other within one short film, um, so that there was this sense of solidarity and support. Um, and so that's one. Another, so I don't only focus on stories about women, but a lot of my work has been following women, which I really love, and it's something I am really passionate about. So another piece that I worked on was following women who ran for Congress for the first time in the 2018 midterms. And so together with a colleague, we did a road trip through the Midwest, meeting these women, watching them as they campaigned, um, and all of, we got really lucky. All of the women we interviewed and met ended up winning their races, and a lot of them made history. So that was also really exciting. And yeah, primarily in my job at Time, I've focused on short documentaries. But right now I'm directing my first feature-length documentary for Time, which hasn't been announced yet, so I won't go into detail on that. But it's been really exciting to see how kind of the different mediums that Time is working with has also progressed from, digital video to now feature-length films with our new Time studios.
Those are some really great projects you've worked on. Thanks for sharing that with us. And I love that so many of them have focused on women, particularly this month, and being Women's History Month, and yesterday was International Women's Day. So actually, congratulations also to all our women viewers on that. So actually, let's go to our viewers' question now. We've have some that we've already come in, and let me say hello first to the National Film School in Caracas, which has sent in a question. They actually have a couple questions for you, Diane. The first is, the documentary genre has become increasingly relevant. In Netflix and in other spaces, the audience for this type of film is growing. So what is your take on the reasons for this new trend?
I think a big part of it has been all these streaming platforms and just the level of access that we have now to see a lot of different types of films. Maybe earlier on, it was a bigger investment, if you were going to buy a ticket and sit in a movie theater. And so, yeah, now we have a lot more access, and I think people's understanding of what a documentary is has been completely redefined. And it's so exciting to see every year these, incredibly creative, artistic films. Like they're not what you would have thought of, maybe even just a couple of years ago when people say the word documentary. There's really a lot of experimentation. People have been calling it, the golden age of documentary. And I see that with my own interests too now, where even with with narrative films that are based on true stories, I'm always left wondering, like, well, would I have rather seen a documentary about this? Like, maybe. So, yeah, it's definitely a really exciting time to be in this space.
Yeah, I agree. My interest in documentaries has definitely grown too, in recent years. The second question from the National Film School in Caracas is, in doing short documentaries such as the Time for series and similar ones, what's the structure that you use to build them?
That's a great question. Um, I would say with first, because we knew that we were building this collection of stories, and that it was going to be a series, we had a very clear structure for them. And it was also helpful just because, like, we were dealing with so many different women with very different stories. But what we found helpful with the structure of the first videos was we always started off with a hook. Their most interesting, uh, their most interesting sound bite, something that would draw you into their story, make you feel like you were sitting there with them. And then we would often talk about, get a glimpse into their childhood and their upbringing, or uh, things that they experienced on their way to achieving that first. And then we would also talk about the challenges that they faced um, on their way to accomplishing it. Then we would talk about the first, and then typically we would kind of wrap it up with some kind of reflection on, their legacy and the advice that they would have. Um, and with short films for Time in general, um, I think there's less of a structure. It really depends. It really depends on the story, and it's great for us that there's a freedom to kind of decide what we want the structure of the piece to be, and that not every single video is a first video, so we have a little bit of freedom with that.
Well, I think the structure that you chose for the Time for series has worked really well. So that's definitely evident. Actually, with women like Serena Williams, who have become role models, for new generations, but obviously some like Serena have had a tough time facing discrimination and making inroads in their fields. Do you have a role model in journalism or do you see some of the Time First interviewees as especially strong role models for yourself or other women?
Yeah, I was really fortunate that as we were working on this project, um, Time had the first female editor-in-chief of the magazine. And I was also working under Time's director of photography, who was a woman, and the head of our video team was a woman. And so I just felt really empowered and surrounded by these women who were role models for me, who were breaking barriers themselves within our workplace.
Great, thank you for that. Looks like we have questions come in from a film student who says, in an interview for this type or audiovisual, how do you manage the interviewee? Also wants to know, how do you balance being a good journalist with a good filmmaker?
Yeah, that's a great question. Something I've definitely learned about, video producing and filmmaking is that the interview process is definitely an art, and sometimes requires a little bit more of your instincts than if you were doing just, a phone interview or an interview for print, because it's so important to make sure that that person feels comfortable and at ease, and wants to talk to you, because all of that comes across on camera. When you're dealing with famous people, a lot of them have that experience and they are good to go. But with the less experienced interviewees, a lot of it is really the environment that you create going into the conversation. And it's hard because you just have to get really good at having good facial expressions and nodding without making any sound so that you don't interrupt the audio. And yeah, I love the second part of that question about balancing being a good journalist with a good filmmaker. I don't think that, I mean, I'd love to hear a little bit more about what they mean by that. If they mean, you know, mastering journalism versus the filmmaking aspect of it, or if they feel like those two things are at odds. I think that these are both things that I worked on simultaneously. It really helped that journalism was something that I studied in school, and then the video aspect I kind of learned a lot on my own on the side through internships and projects that I did, and a lot of the technical skills were things that I developed on my own. But I know a lot of people who, you know, came the opposite route, who went to film school and they learn more about journalism on the job, or so there are a lot of different pathways to that.
Well, I think those are some really helpful, perspectives you just shared, especially with some of our film students, particularly some of the challenges that we wouldn't normally think about in doing this type of thing if you haven't done it before. And speaking of that, we have a couple more questions from film students in Merida City in Venezuela. So they ask, as a journalist, how do you find a theme or angle for a story or video when the subject is someone so famous that everything has already been said? It's a great question.
Yes, that is a really great question. And that's definitely one of the challenges we had in this project. But again, it helps that it helps having a very specific framework and lens for all of these interviews, and that even though they talk about stories that people might be aware of and might have heard before, we felt that it was powerful to present them as a collection and to really hone in on their experience as a woman being a first. But yeah, I think, you know, the key to doing these types of interviews is really just doing a lot of research, reading everything that's out there, and trying to find the questions that haven't been asked yet. And a lot of times that starts by seeing what has already been asked. But, you know, sometimes it's also revisiting certain things and asking it in a different way, and kind of focusing on the emotional level rather than just asking them to retell the story. Really going back to like how they were feeling in that moment. A lot of times, you know, that's a lot of what we did with First, and we found that it was really powerful. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's some really good advice. Thank you. And we have also William Colmenares, who's would like advice on a different matter. First of all, he sends greetings from our American Center, or American Space in Valencia, Carabobo, CEVAC. And he asks, is there any advice you would give to young women from the Americas who want to begin creating documentaries? Any advice for them?
Yeah. So this is also something I mentioned last time, so I will just repeat it briefly in case people missed it. But one of the most inspiring things for me was with this project for the magazine covers that we did. with this project, we ended up publishing 12 covers with these women, and all of the photos were taken on an iPhone. And it was just such a powerful statement that, you know, it's something that people have always said to me. It's not about the camera, it's about the person behind the camera. So I would say, you know, when you're starting out, it can be really easy to feel frustrated about the equipment and just not having the budget to do things the way you want to. But I would say just keep reminding yourself that it's not about the equipment, it's about the person behind the camera. And I would just encourage you to practice as much as you can. I think I was able to develop my skills because I turned it into a hobby. And I made videos for all sorts of things. I made travel videos, I made fashion videos, and it was so different from the types of things I was working on as a journalism student. But all of those things were opportunities for me to develop my skills and do it in a fun way, with not a lot of pressure. And I found that when I realized I wanted to become a filmmaker, become a video producer, that that those things had created a really great foundation for me. So yeah, I would just encourage you to keep practicing.
Mm-hmm. That advice definitely bears repeating. So thank you for that. Um, you know, Serena herself has faced a lot of self-image issues. She's faced racism. She was the first African American tennis female player to be so successful. Really an interesting personality to explore. One of the things that struck me in the film was her saying that she didn't have a role model. She really wished she would have had a role model. I wonder, and I think you talked about this a little bit in the last time we were with you, but as an Asian American, do you feel, or did you have a role model in journalism that, you know, served as a role model for you, or what did you look for?
That's a great question. You know, there wasn't really anyone that I was aware of. I mean, there were definitely Asian American female journalists who were out there, you know, Connie Chung and Lisa Ling. I mean, there are a lot who I look up to, but I think it's such a shame that I personally was not more aware of them. So yeah, it's so important to have role models. And you know, adding on to that comment about the criticisms that Serena receives, another thing that kind of set her apart from the other women was that I would have thought that in sports, where there are very clear metrics for things, where there are very clear markers of success, and you can say, you know, they did this, this, and this. It's different from other industries in that way. And then for her to still be faced with just all these comments about her success and having to even fight for fair prize money in the sport, which is, you know, something we've seen in a lot of sports, but it just never fails to shock me.
Same here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that gender discrimination, like she notes, you know, if you're just talking numbers and money, and they were drawing, you know, more viewers, you know, than some male tournaments, how can you justify that, right? So, yeah, tremendous. But thank goodness we have people like Serena Williams, you know, to carry on that fight and point things like that out. So we're down to our last few minutes before finishing the session. Of course, we want to invite you back in 2 weeks at the same time. We want to invite our viewers, you know, to come back and for the next session. And of course, Diane, always, you know, thanks again for accepting our invitation. It's a great honor and pleasure for our Venezuelan audience as well. Do you have any final thoughts for today?
I just wanted to say, yeah, thanks so much for all the great questions. It's so wonderful to see everyone's involvement. Yeah.
Sorry, I almost lost connection there for a second, so I might have missed your last few words, Diane. Sorry about that, but I'm sure our viewers got it, so that's great. I also do want to, thank all of our team at Sevilla Las Mercedes again for hosting us. It's been tremendous having you as our host. Look forward to that for the next sessions. Also want to thank all of the NGOs and journalists, the Binational Center students, and general audience who joined us today. We're really looking forward to having you back for the next Time First series. For the next one, we'll be featuring Ellen DeGeneres, very different genre, so we look forward to having interesting questions on that as well. That's it, I guess, for today. Thank you again and have a great rest of the day.
Thanks.
Thank you again, Diane.
Thank you.